You are live on YouTube.
Yes.
Ready? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a little late in the afternoon, so I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for being here. We had a meeting prior to ours, and we'll get going. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of our prior meeting. Thank you, Supervisor Driscoll. Second by Supervisor McGowan. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. The first discussion action item is regarding the county workplace violence policy. And I'd like to turn it right over to Administrator Moore to give us a better understanding of the issue here.
The issue is that it's not always clear the way the policy is written, who has the authority to adjudicate a complaint. There's a section, there's a summary section of the policy that's toward the end of the policy. And it's page, it starts on the investigation of complaints section starts on page 20. It's short, so I'll read it. Allegations of workplace violence are treated seriously by the county, and all reports of threats of violence, actual violence, and suspicious activities will be promptly and thoroughly investigated. The investigation will be conducted in such a way as to maintain confidentiality to the extent practicable under the circumstances. In the event they are asked, employees and management are expected to cooperate fully with any ongoing investigation. Based on the seriousness of the incident, the county administrator may assemble a workplace violence management response team, which may include the county attorney, law enforcement, employee assistance program coordinator, various department managers, representatives from the Employee Health and Safety Committee, employee union representatives, or others as deemed necessary. The results of the investigation shall be communicated in writing to both the person filing the complaint and the accused party. Findings of wrongdoing resulting from such investigation will be reported to the Personnel Committee in executive session within 60 days, provided no delay to allow for law enforcement investigation as necessary. So if I could paraphrase, the investigation stage of one of these complaints is supposed to be kept confidential. And the idea of the final section where it states that findings of wrongdoing are reported to personnel is to address essentially what amounts to protection of the innocent or the falsely accused, is that a complaint comes in, a confidential investigation is done, and it's only ever going to be reported out if there were findings that the complaint was meritorious, that there were findings of wrongdoing. In the course of handling complaints, we've come to the realization that when a complaint is filed against a certain type of individual who is an officer or employee of the county, whether that be the county administrator, whether it be an elected official, whether it be a member of the Board of Supervisors, moving from the investigatory phase into the conclusion of the investigation and findings of wrongdoing, it is not immediately clear how you do that because of questions of authority. I, for instance, as county administrator, have no disciplinary authority over a superior, such as a member of the Board of Supervisors, or over an independently elected official, such as the district attorney. Another county employee who may be handling an investigation, if a complaint is made against me, doesn't necessarily have authority to find that I engaged in wrongdoing. So that's the juncture we're at here, where we have, depending on who a complaint is made against, a situation where you kind of get stuck in the investigatory phase, and until the Board of Supervisors makes a determination as to the entity that can find findings of wrongdoing, that's where we're stuck.
Does anyone have any questions about the issue being raised? Yes, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just have a question about the definition of workplace. I maintain a mobile office. if it's off the Warren County campus or a Warren County facility, I mean, is this still apply to that? Also, electronic emails, telephone calls, text, those fall under the same definition of workplace?
I'm going to have to defer over here. I don't know the full definition.
If I'm at a hockey game and someone gets in my face, I mean, you know, does that fall under, you know?
I know what
we're
you mean.
discussing? Yeah.
As an at-large supervisor, we
Yes.
don't really have offices.
Right.
We're in the community.
Workplace violence.
Is
And
that-
even a town supervisor, you know, you're at a special event, you're out in your communities and you know, again, someone says something that could be considered to be threatening or, you know, go after your family or whatever, you know, the circumstance, you know, how does that fall into, well, our discussion?
It's a good question. I think if we don't have an answer clear right now, that's okay. We can come back to it.
I could take a stab at it. There's a section 2 of the policy defining workplace violence. In accordance with section 27B of the New York State labor law, and for purpose of this workplace violence prevention plan, workplace violence is any physical assault, threatening behavior, or verbal abuse occurring in the work setting within Warren County. And further down under B, that was paragraph A. Paragraph B, workplace violence may include threats in the following specific situations when made in person, in writing, by telephone, or electronic communication. It's perhaps not a crystal clear definition, but it speaks to some of what you asked.
Supervisor McGowan.
So that to me, since we're the office without walls, I mean, and that could even go for Supervisor Garrity or Thomas, you know, once you're out of your workplace and, you know, whatever you're doing. I mean, a hockey game is, for instance, we're there on our personal time enjoying the game, but we're still representing everyone around us. With that, you know, if someone got in and it happened to be toward a, you know, toward what we're doing as our jobs, as being a, you know, representative, would that be, to me, that would be considered a workplace threat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how are we, you know, how are you guys protected? You know, how are we all protected when we go outside of here?
I think those are good concerns. I feel like that it maybe depends on the circumstances as to why someone is getting in your face. Like you said, if it was about something you're doing at the county or something like that. So I think it's maybe a case by case scenario. But what we're trying to do today is flesh out a solution for the lack of clarity on who is going to make findings, you know, make the final report in a situation where it's, say, about the county administrator. Obviously, he can't do it. And or with another elected or with anyone on the Board of Supervisors. Does the committee have a suggestion as to that solution? Or
Chairperson, if I can just,
let me just defer to the county attorney quickly.
if I could just clarify, it's two pieces. One is when there is a finding, in particular circumstances, the policy doesn't say who reviews that investigative finding, I'm going to say, investigative finding. Because just because there's an investigation that occurred doesn't mean that the result of that investigation is correct. There has to be some person or persons in authority that make a determination to accept, reject, or modify the findings of that investigation. Number two, what happens when there's no finding of a violation of this policy? There's no method for that to be reported anywhere. That doesn't go to HR, and that's problematic as well, and something that's of immediate concern to me in dealing with ongoing issues under this policy. So it's really two pieces. One is who's the decision-making authority? And two, if there's no finding of a violation of the policy, what, if anything, happens with that allegation or complaint? Does it also go to human resources? Does it disappear into thin air? Does it, what happens to it once the investigation's done and the findings are, the decision maker makes a finding on that incident?
It was always my impression that the person or entity making the final report was the county administrator. Is that not the case, or maybe that's just sort of how it was happening, but it needs to be clarified in the policy? Okay, okay. All right, so Kevin, Supervisor Garrity,
So the question is,
now we have 3 questions.
if it's a in the private sector, HR is always involved. In the private sector, if it gets kicked up from HR, it always would go to the manager of the facility. So, and then obviously here, the county attorney should be involved. So for certain things, my question is, who's making the complaint? Where do they make the complaint to right now? Because I don't spend a lot of time on it, but where, if somebody wants to make a workplace violence complaint, they make it out on a piece of paper and they file it with HR, I would assume.
It says, page 20 says, threats can go to your immediate supervisor
Okay,
or other member of management or the police. The county administrator shall also be notified.
but there's got to be a clearinghouse for these workplace violence complaints. There's got to be somebody who is the keeper of all these complaints or gets them.
Is there anything clearer, Ryan, regarding where the reports go? Where the complaints or threats or whatever we're calling them?
No, I think you hit the correct section there. And then the following paragraph is any employee, visitor, temporary or contract employee or contractor engaged by the county who witnesses an incident of workplace violence or the potential for violence also has a duty to report the incident to management.
It doesn't define which management.
No, the policy seems to suggest that it'll be handled with, in kind of the chain of command. So up to the department level head. And that's really dealing with Warren County employee
Employees to,
base
yeah, that's,
issues. But it still doesn't provide a mechanism for a level of management or a department head to do something with an incident report or a complaint if there's a finding, no finding. So there's really, the county's not maintaining any record that I can see under this policy of complaints that come in. So the example of maybe an employee on employee harassment, physical intimidation, maybe there's 2, 3, 4 complaints that come in over a period of time, but it's not clear that those complaints are being collected by any particular
but I would think,
office if they're declined, or there's a fine, the chain of command finds that there's no basis in it. The more immediate concern is what do we do at the top tier of the county? Because clearly there is no department head or county administrator that in my legal opinion, can pass a judgment or finding regarding a member of the Board of Supervisors.
Supervisor McGowan.
Could, in that case, we go to the Board of Ethics? Just a question.
Go ahead.
May I
Go
answer
ahead.
that?
Yes, please.
That's an excellent question, because I think there's maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding in the public about the scope of the Board of Ethics. And the Board of Ethics is limited to allegations and claims of violations of the Code of Ethics. So there's 2 terms that are used basically for a complaint. One is that a conflict of interest. That's a conflict of interest under a specific provision of the ethics code for Warren County, not a perceived conflict of interest in, hey, you want this result and therefore you shouldn't be pursuing it or taking an official action, which may be well outside of the financial or other provisions of the ethics code. So yeah, the Board of Ethics really would have absolutely no interaction with a complaint that's dealing with workplace violence. It's completely outside the scope of what their appointment is for.
I understand it.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, then in that case, why not as a board as a whole? Since we all have an equal part on the board, that the board has to meet to discuss, you know, I mean, that seems the fairest. That the board, the whole board meets as the final finding.
I have no problem with that. I don't think it should come down. I don't want it to come to the chair of personnel or something like that. I think
No,
that would
it's
be
not, you
very,
know, it's not, you can't really go down to one person.
Right.
Because, I mean, like I said, because we're all equal. You know, we all sit on even chairs here, so why wouldn't it come to the board? In this, if it's, you know, beyond an employee type thing, if it's on the, because it's not fair for the attorney or the county administrator, you know, because of the levels that we're at.
let me just clarify. You're talking about when it's instances of someone who the administrator doesn't have any supervisory authority over.
Well, Ryan stated that, you know, he basically works for the county, you know, under the supervisors. Correct? I mean, I'm not trying to
Yeah,
take
yes,
anything away
yes.
from you, Mr. Moore. All right?
That is very, very
You know,
correct.
But I mean, so if to go any higher, it has to be the 20 of them.
Us, right, okay. Supervisor Garrity.
I will reiterate what I said before. A workplace violence complaint should be reviewed by the HR department. They are the professionals that know what our policy is, and they should be the professionals to review these policies. And if they don't feel comfortable, then they can take it up to the county attorney, who is supposed to be an advice giver for us. And then you can go from there, but to take a complaint to 20 people, knowing the way it works, I don't agree with it. But I do agree that this person in HR is trained. That's hopefully they're trained to take these complaints and then let them go to their direct boss. If it doesn't involve the administrator, whoever their direct boss is, and go to the administrator and the county attorney as a threesome, sit down and say, okay, does this, and now this not solving the issue 100% right now, but at least lets the three people in our, that we trust to be our leadership committee to take it further. I mean, HR is where it belongs. I mean, I'm not an HR individual, and what I may think is a workplace violence complaint may not be. They're the trained individuals that went to school to understand that. I'm just basing it on what would happen in the private sector.
I just do want to point out that we have a form at the back of the current policy for an incident report. The county administrator informed me that people do not have to use this form. At the very end, it says that the form will be given to the department head, county administrator, self-insurance, and county attorney. We don't even have HR listed there. So I think that's a very valid point, that we need to make sure these things are getting funneled through HR for the initial complaint, perhaps the investigation, and then findings in a normal instance.
You would, may I
Yes,
speak?
go ahead. And then I need to come back to Supervisor.
You would think that the HR person will be the one to go to the department head and said, we've got this complaint. We need to investigate it and act on it. And if you're talking about a member of the Board of Supervisors, it's a little bit different story.
Right, right. Chairwoman Sieber.
Thank you. To Supervisor Garrity's point, I think there are two separate issues here and should be discussed separately. As we discuss the policy and procedures for employees, I think it's completely appropriate to have our county administrator, who is the day-to-day running day-to-day operations at the Warren County, involved in that with the HR director. And, but I am completely opposed to any concept of 3 men in a room. I think that we absolutely need to make sure that there are checks and balances in this. And we just went through this process with the Board of Ethics and by establishing an independent body. As it relates to the members of the Board of Supervisors, any elected member or our county administrator, this is different than the sexual harassment policy and compliance officers that were identified. This particular policy absolutely needs some types of checks and balances, because as elected or as the county administrator that reports to the entire board, I don't know how you have our HR director making a decision on something like that, when in fact, they all report to the board. We've been accused before of protecting our own, of not being biased. And this year we worked very hard to have transparency, to go out for private reports when we need to do that, when there's complaints filed against our employees that report directly to the board. And as it relates to the board, we should have a similar process in place. So I think there's two separate issues that need to get decided upon. But to our county attorney's advice and point, there's no way to move forward
Right.
until you determine who's making the determination.
I agree. And I think there are two separate issues. And I think that some additional time spent on making sure that we flush out the policy a little bit better as it relates to our general employee population. However, as the county attorney alluded to, there is an ongoing matter that does not relate to a normal county employee. And I'd like some guidance from the committee about how to deal with that specific issue, because we're already beyond the 60 days set forth in our policy. So if we need to go into executive session to discuss,
I guess we're gonna have to, because I don't know what you're talking about.
okay, all right. Would you like to make a
I'll
motion?
make a motion, we go to executive section.
Thank you. A second by Supervisor McGowan. All those in favor,
If we
please
could
say
just-
aye.
Point of order, I guess.
Yes.
If we can just clarify that the purpose for the executive session is that the subject matter would be dealing with matters related to a particular person's appointment, employment, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal.
Okay, on advice of counsel, you fine with that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know that.
Supervisor McGowan, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
I
Opposed? That